Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Cash Flow Veteran Podcast. This is your host, John. I have one of my favorite people. Her name is Jasmine Paul. I got a chance to work with her now as a quote-unquote supervisor, I guess, of hers at one point in time. But I honestly loved coming into work, so I always loved seeing her smiling face. Always brightened my day. So it always made working in the Air Force always a little bit better. So anyway, saying that, thanks so much for coming on, Jasmine. I appreciate it.
Yes, thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, let's, get into this. So, what's your military history background like? And then how did that, or where did that, I guess, lead to your journey in entrepreneurship? And then more specifically, kind of the current endeavor, because I do want to kind of plug that at the beginning here, but I also kind of want to make sure we plug it at the end too.
Yeah. So, I guess my military journey started from my parents, military brat, Air Force brat, and never really wanted to go in the military at all. Like, I was not that girl. But I went to college. My freshman year, I had a few scholarships. And I remember getting a call from my mom saying, hey, you need to come back home because I'm not signing another loan for you. And so I was like, ugh. All right. So I had to figure out what I'm going to do, how I'm going to get this money. And so I joined ROTC. I was one of two scholarships for crosstown students. And so I got a scholarship. Was able to pay the rest of my school. And that's kind of how I jumped into, I guess, the military. So it was definitely just for the degree. And how I jumped into entrepreneurship was I actually started my first company while I was in college. I was a videographer. I was in school for film. And so I remember just taking videos and just really loving being passionate about photography and videography. And people were paying me money for it. And I was like, oh, cool. Why not? So I kept doing it. I was doing weddings. I ended up doing a concert for a Rock Nation artist. And that was really cool. Got to be on the tour bus and do all those fun things. Went to New York and was working with Ladies of Hip Hop Festival, which was a nonprofit organization that does dance and art throughout the city, working with Beyonce's choreographers, Janet Jackson's choreographers. And it was just totally cool experience. And I got burnt out in 2012, my senior year. I was overtasked, like just so much work going on. I didn't have a lot of help and I wasn't charging people the right amount for my work. Like people that charge right now, my mind is blown because I'm like, I didn't charge that at all as a 19-year-old. And my goal after college was to get a master's degree in entrepreneurship because I wanted to understand the business. I felt like I had the drive and the passion and the artistic creativity, but I didn't understand the number side. And so that's what landed me a master's in entrepreneurship, which is what we did together at Oklahoma State, and kind of went into this cycle of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of really dived in even on the military side of it, where you got involved in a lot of the, I'll say, extracurricular stuff that was going on too, and really diving into that and taking, charge and leadership roles and a lot of that stuff, and really just applying yourself in that regard too. So certainly, like being able to run things like that, I think certainly gave you a huge leg up into anything that you would end up doing. So I think you certainly have shown yourself in that one. So what about the current endeavor you have going on? I really want to dig into that real quick.
Right now, I'm working on my first children's book out of a financial literacy series because I saw a gap in the market where people are teaching financial literacy. You're teaching saving, spending, giving, and earning. And those are principles that we all have learned in some point of our lives. But what I am teaching is money engagement. So engagement with conversations between parents and engagement with conversations between adults. And so that's what I found, that they aren't able to articulate themselves in understanding money. So they get saving, they get budgeting, they get that, but they just aren't able to articulate themselves. And so with this book, I'm hoping that they will be encouraged to, number one, to find what their success looks like, but also be able to earn and then pay for the dreams that they want in the future.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, Create Fin Stew, it really sounds like, it's just a way to really kind of foster, like you said, the ability to have those conversations. And I guess one of my quick questions would be, it might seem kind of daunting because I think a lot of people feel they need a whole lot of knowledge before they can like even talk to somebody else, or they even talk to their children about it. But it's also kind of like they're not acknowledging that they have to start wherever they're at. And even with their kids, they have to start wherever they're at.
Exactly. Absolutely. One thing that came to mind as you were talking was when I jumped into real estate back when we were stationed together. And I honestly had no idea about what I was doing. I just knew that it was cheaper to have a mortgage than it was to rent. Like, that's all I really knew. I had like this dummies, like Buying a House for Dummies book that I only read like 3 chapters of. And then I just jumped in. Like, I really did. I was 23 years old. I really didn't know what I was doing, but I was learning as I was going, and I was having conversations with people like you, people like Dave Sholowitz, to understand what I was actually doing. And so when it comes to money, we do know, we do have some type of knowledge because we're earning a paycheck wherever, whatever industry, we get that concept of earning. But the problem is we're not able to translate that to goals that we desire. So maybe we want to take that trip to Fiji, or maybe we want to have a generational wealth through real estate. Sometimes we're not able to articulate and kind of streamline what step 1 looks like, and then what step 5 or 10 looks like. And so you're right, just starting somewhere, but we get the concept of earning. So now we just have to transition into talking about, okay, where do we save? What investment vehicle do we use? What return on investment looks good for our family? Because real estate might not be the strategy that you might want to take. It might be royalties. It might be business income. There are other ways to gain money or earn money. And so we just have to figure out what works best for each family.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We may disagree politically on a few things for sure, but like libertarianism for me has been one of the most eye-opening kind of philosophies that I've had. And I've always kind of wondered, how do you take some of these more complex ideas, what's the concept of what's seen versus what's unseen. So it's the law of the excluded alternatives, because when you choose one policy, that means you're giving up a lot of other policies to be able to do that stuff. It's just kind of like with a lot of the other principles that kind of come along with that. I was trying to, how do I actually talk to my kids about some of these? And that's where I discovered the Tuttle Twin series. And they have a huge number of children's books, but what's interesting to me, and I'll caveat this with talking about my girls' school. So one of the things that we learned about early on with Donovan was about the Montessori school system, and how Maria Montessori, who was a child psychologist, actually developed her curriculum to really match the tactile and basically getting down to the learning level of whatever it was. So 6 weeks old, it was where some of them even start. And it's really, it might be quote unquote a daycare, but the way that they go about doing it makes a lot of sense. And where we saw Donovan and Sloan are really excel so far. And obviously Eliana's not really old enough to really get to this point yet. But one of the things, as you learn something, you're always taught by one person. And the thing is it could be by the teacher, or it could be by another student who's currently mastered it. And then you learn it, and then you try to master it, and you get better at it. You're kind of graded on it. And then at some point, even before technically you've mastered it, you're allowed to teach some of that stuff to other people. And that's what I think, that if people are starting where they're at with what they know, as they start learning, if they can then synthesize that to be able to teach it, absolutely. I think it really drives the subconscious mind to be able to bring those principles to light. It makes you understand it in a whole nother way of being able to teach that. And that's what I found with, ICBM training. So I love doing the training, and it made me a better missileer, and it made me a better officer by being able to turn that around and actually focus on teaching somebody and passing on that knowledge for sure. And
people are able to, they're able to highlight your gaps too. Yep. You're able to see where you might not be able to see, or they may be able to question things that maybe you didn't explain well. And so I think that's important. Like, we don't have to be millionaires to understand the value of a dollar, to understand what our priorities are in order to become a millionaire. I think sometimes, especially in entrepreneurship, we're always looking toward the gurus, and which is great, right? They're there for a reason. But we also have value, and we also bring something to the table. And I think we definitely, especially with Create Fins too, we highlight that creativity. So not every coaching model looks the same for each family. because what you're great at, what the Paynes are great at, might not be what's great or best for the Pauls or great for the Smiths. But we try to include what you're good at, and then highlight those strengths in developing strategies for wealth building.
Yeah, and I think this conversation we're having, I mean, I've been doing this month series on, investing, or what is the ideal investment. And, it kind of started out really kind of dealing with 401ks and the stock market, and dealing with those types of things. But even my conversations with some of the other guests that I've had, even from where I'm coming from, I highlight maybe some of the downsides to some of it, and try to expand people's understanding about some of it. But at the end of the day, I think I've had this conversation just come, or at least the topic come back up and up again, that, hey, it really matters where you're at, and acknowledging that education is the first investment, and probably one of the best investments for return on the time that you're going to spend, or the money that you're going to spend getting that education as well.
Absolutely. I would say education to the point where you take action.
Right.
Because sometimes there's this paralysis analysis, or analysis paralysis.
Yep.
You have so much information and then you don't move and you don't execute. And it's great that you have all the information, but you have to move and you have to execute. And in moving and executing, you make mistakes. I know with my first property, I made, I did not know what I was doing. I was so confused. I was literally had no clue about owning a home or being a landlord. None. But I learned as I went. So then when I bought my second property, it was like clockwork. All the mistakes I made the first time, I didn't make the second time. And then I made mistakes in the second investment. And so now I'm okay, with the third, I'm okay, I'm not going to do that again, or didn't like how that outcome was. I'm going to try something new. And so you definitely have to learn. And I think if we break it down, let's not even talk about investments. Let's talk about relationships. We do every single day in our relationships. Your wife or your spouse does something you don't like, you communicate that, and then hopefully they learn and they respect and honor what you say. They do something different that has a better outcome. Yeah,
for sure. I certainly fell prey to the analysis by paralysis by analysis, but I also eventually I'll probably do an ebook on it one day, just the confessions of a seminar junkie or whatever too. It's always what's that one thing that's going to set me across the top? And certainly just kind of fell for some of the get rich stuff when, kind of early on with that too. And just being oh, this is a great idea. And that's, Dave and I talked about it on our podcast when we were bringing up Bigger Pockets. It's there's so much good information on there. Just ooh, I want to do this type of investing. Oh, I want to do that type of investing. And then it can get really, really overwhelming very, very quickly. And at the end of the day, it's just you probably should just assess where you're at, where your gaps are at, and ask yourself the question, where do you want to go? And there's lots of different paths that are going to get there too. So, I mean, you just have to kind of make one decision and understand it's going to take you some time to, really kind of get it off the ground. But then after you start for a while, maybe you can then start asking people who've been where you are, say, hey, at what point should I pivot? At what point should I persevere through this? I mean, and that's where I think coming into those relationships, not just the relationships with the people that are closest to you, that it's going to impact the most, but certainly any of the business relationships or mentor relationships that you developed along the way too is certainly really, really important.
Absolutely.
I do want to switch gears a little bit because I want to ask a little bit more about this book that you have coming up, and more specifically about just what are some of the good money habits that adults can have, and then we'll get into what you think, why you think, and then what you think is most important to teach the kids as well. So let's start with just good money habits for the adults in the room.
Yeah. So what you about assessing where you're at. So even this morning, I got several messages from people asking me, okay, there are some IPOs coming out. So, Airbnb, Asana, these are these really great niche marketed companies that are coming out, right? They're going to be open to the public for shares. And so they're asking me okay, which one should I do? Which one should I do? And I'm okay, first off, I don't give investment advice. That's not me. You have to assess where you're at. So what is important, right? So what are your goals? How do you define success? Because success might not look like investing in the stock market at this point. It might be paying off the crazy debt that you have, or it might be creating this nest egg because, like, looking at our economy right now, we might want to save as much as we. So we have to assess where you are and how you assess that. So I always look at my last 3 months of expenses. Because of COVID, we're able to analyze what's really going on. So people are in the house, they're not going out as much, they're not eating out, but other expenses have increased. So things like electric have increased. Your food bill. I know for me, my food bill has increased because I'm eating all the time at home. Like, I'm eating way more than I used to. And so I have to assess where I'm at financially to figure out, okay, what can I eliminate? Because I'm always trying to reduce my expenses. Mm-hmm. I want my cash flow to be more than my expenses. So I'm always trying to reduce it. And I'm trying to figure out how can I position myself to my goals. So my goal for 2021 is to sell at least 1,000 books of my first children's book. That is my goal for 2021. And so how I do that, I have to figure out, okay, how much does it cost to illustrate a self-published book? What are the different things that I need? So there are other sub goals in that. So I have to have an audience. I have to make sure that there's publicity and marketing. I have to make sure I have a good story, and there are other costs associated to that. So I think just assessing where you are, doing that analysis of the last 3 months to see where your expenses are, and to see, okay, if my goal is to be X, how do I get there? And then mapping it out, taking it step by step. Like you and I know, having a checklist, like having 1 step 2, step 3, and being able to get that's something like I have a planner that I use, the Christian planner. And I literally have, like, I don't know if you can see, but my top 3 items that I do every single day. Those top 3 items are going towards the bigger goal.
Nice. Yeah. I have something very, very similar, making sure that each, when you're really trying to take down that elephant and eat the whole thing, you really just got to take it one bite at a time, know where to start, and really just get after it. And, there's a bunch of different books kind of about the topic, but at the end of the day, I mean, you got to break down that overall goal, and then you have to assign a time, you have to assign a date, you have to be very specific about what needs to happen, what needs to occur, and then being able to reflect back on, hey, was that successful? How well did I do? Okay, if I didn't do it, why wasn't it so successful? Why couldn't I do it? And then how can I come back from that? And it's really, I think those are some of the, sometimes it's not even so much about that thing getting done as much as it is about you learning the lessons of improving yourself, dealing with failure, dealing with, those things going through. And like those habits are really going to what make you successful in the long run, no matter where you're at, no matter what you're doing.
Absolutely. Those habits are that's financial wellness, right? It's having good habits. It's making sure you're taking that 10% or 20% or whatever percent of your income to your savings or to investment. Like those habits that you create over time is how you generate wealth. Like I'm going to go to Nordstrom right now and rack up $1,000 bill every single month. It's going to show in my finances that that's a habit that is maybe not a good habit, because now I'm spending, thousands of dollars every year on clothes or shoes. But we could take that habit of spending, we could take that habit and transform it into saving. And so now I'm saving or investing thousands of dollars. And I just put that on autopilot and let that do its thing over the course of, 5-10 years.
Yeah, certainly my hope with Cashflow Veteran is being able, like you were saying, being able to assess where people are at currently, and then offering them at least a different perspective on where I think they should start based on the research I've done, based on my conversations with people like you and others, where, I really do think that it may not be that they go into business for themselves, but certainly like you only have a couple of different options. You have to decrease your expenses. You're always working on doing that, just like you were saying. And other than that, you have to increase your pie. Like you have to find a way to bring in more increase. And when you're looking at, I think I had Nick Edwards kind of talking about this, when you're looking at some of those investment vehicles, you're talking about stuff that's really far in the future. And certainly like the only time I would say like immediately you should be taking advantage of investing is if they're matching whatever it is and just do the match, because that's 100% return on whatever you're going to get. That's a no brainer. That makes sense. But other than that, I mean, it could just be a second job. It could be maybe you start doing something locally. If you're more of a crafty type of person, you just do something on Saturdays, one that brings you joy, and two, that does put a little bit of money in your pocket as well, in doing something from that perspective. Or it could be going your route or my route and actually, starting a podcast or writing a book or whatever that case is, and actually starting a business to really increase that overall pie as well. Because those are the things that are really going to have the, I would say, shorter and longer term returns on your effort. So, well, let's get into, tell us about your first book for kids and stuff too. I certainly want to, don't give any spoilers away or anything like that if you don't want to, but certainly as much details you want to give. I'm really interested. I'm certainly going to be buying it for my kids. So
I'm excited. Yeah. So I actually wrote my first book. So I published that like right as Corona hit. But it was a blessing to push it out there because it gave me the courage and experience that I needed. Again, going back to those failures and those lessons learned. I wrote it because I wanted a guide to put out there for young people to understand about their finances, about faith, mentors, role models, things that I learned along the way and kind of stumbled along the way. But putting that first book out helped me write the second book, which me going back to those lessons learned, those failures. Now that I know better and I've done a lot more research, I'm able to create the second book, which is a financial literacy series to empower children to be more financially capable. So it has a really awesome lesson. The main characters are Joey and Melody, and they're just trying to figure out how they can get to their dreams. And so what Joey, the main character, is noticing is that his spending is costing him his dreams. And so the lesson that's going to evolve, I won't give any spoilers, but the lesson that should be evolving is just how does he figure out how can he afford his dreams without spending so much money?
Yeah. So what's that title?
So it's A Boy, a Budget, and
A Boy, a Budget, and a Dream. That's good. I like that. That's awesome.
Everybody is teaching financial literacy, which is a good thing. So the financial services in $15 billion industry. However, they only spend $682 million on financial education. That means for every $25 that's spent, you're only getting $1 of education and marketing. And so I find that very interesting because it's easier for me to, I guess for the financial service industry, it's easier for them to sell a mortgage or a car note or, some type of line of credit than it is to educate its consumers on how to manage their money. So it's definitely an interesting market. There are a lot of books out there. I'll even highlight them. A lot of books like Money Ninja, the Missing Money Monsters. They're all sharing this message of financial education. And I would encourage you and your listeners to buy those books because to me, we all need to be able to learn about this. And every book that gets into the hands of a child is important. So I support all of those books that are out there and the authors that push these books out there because if there's a survey that states that only 33% of parents are actually talking to their kids about money, that means 67% aren't. So the more books out there, to me, the more opportunity for a child to get the education that they need to be more financially stable when they become an adult.
Yeah. I just had a thought in my brain and I really might have you back on to kind of talk about it. It's one of the monthly topics that I'm going to try to have. And it's about basically kind of doing a business or doing entrepreneurship, starting a business as a family, and doing something from that perspective and using it as a way to, because as you're talking, I'm wondering if you've thought about doing kind of a supplemental course for adults and for children as you kind of go along with that, with the curriculum and stuff like that too.
Yes, that's something that building a few programs that will supplement the book. But also I was thinking, there are certain things that we do for a year. For me personally, like I go to mental health counseling. I have a therapist because I believe in therapy and the power. I don't just use my therapist when times are bad. I also have a therapist when times are good because I always want to make sure that I'm the best version of Jasmine that I can be. So why don't we do that with financial literacy? Sometimes in our entire lifetime, we only take a financial literacy course maybe once or twice in our entire lifetime. And so what this program will do will encourage year-long financial literacy and economic education.
Yeah. Well, and I think, just being able to go to therapy or going to the right person to talk to about that, I think makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. I mean, I was originally getting my master's before I switched over to entrepreneurship in mental health counseling. And that was always one of the things I came back to was, when you get to your bad times, it's typically because of a lot of incremental decisions that you've made over time and which are part of your behavior, part of your habit, part of your subconscious. And so you really have to kind of take, it's almost like getting an oil change or whatever else. I mean, you're just hitting those things periodically to make sure you're going in the right direction. It's just as important for your relationships and stuff like that too, to get done. I mean, I would even say that maybe, if you're a business partner with somebody, maybe the two of you occasionally should go in there and work on the relationship piece of the business partnership rather than waiting for something else, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and you're moving forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's something that I think a lot of people, they wait till something bad happens or they wait till they get into this crazy amount of debt. And then they're trying to figure out, okay, what do I do next? Instead of just having that routine, that check-in, hey, am I in the right path? Or, here's something new that came out. Maybe you should consider. That's something that's important.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think we've covered some pretty good topics about, good money habits for adults and then teaching the kids and stuff. So I do want to get into just the burst fire questions. So you can answer these as quickly. And from what I've seen, they're as long as possible because I've literally spent a whole another 10 minutes just in one of these quick questions, trying to go a little bit of the bigger pocket style for like the fire round, but that tends to not happen typically. There's always something else that pops into my brain. I want to ask something else too. Anyway. All right. So what's the toughest thing about being an entrepreneur that you found?
Ooh, time. So managing time. I want to devote so much time, but I also have a full-time job. And I'm also in school to get my doctorate. So just mapping out time for the business. Sometimes I can I feel like contribute too much time and where I don't get sleep. So I just have to manage the time, have a cutoff where it's like, okay, you're not being productive. You just need to stop.
But I think with your planner, with my planner, the fact that you actually have what's the one thing you can do today, I think you can at least take solace. I mean, because you will have to say no. And I think that's one skill people have to learn is, hey, you have to get comfortable with saying no to other good opportunities that present themselves because you don't want to give up the great for the good things that might come, right? And so having something that you can track and check off and saying, yeah, I did get this done today. It just shows you, hey, you are moving towards something.
Right. Absolutely.
So what resource has actually helped you most in your entrepreneurship journey?
Oh, there's so many. I'll go to books and then people. So books, I would say The Defining Decade by Dr. Meg J. That was really good. Just defining your 20s and just understanding. So it's not like a business book at all. It's more mental health, but it's talking about how you really should be living out your 20s, doing your 20s, how you should be doing your 20s, right? So that was a really good book for me. My doctor, I think maybe we had him in a class. He had the first 100 days of entrepreneurship.
Yep. Dr. Behringer, Bruce Behringer.
Yep. Bruce Behringer's book was really good. The first 100 days. Mm-hmm. I still reference that book to this day.
Same here.
And then people have been vital. So talking to people from Oklahoma State University, talking to our professors. I talk to Dr. Behringer all the time. Back when I was completing my first book. I actually was able to use my first book, Set Your Truth Free, as my dissertation, like our thesis that we had to do at the end, our project. And so just talking to him about different opportunities, how I can leverage, my experiences in the military into entrepreneurship. Just having those conversations with people who have been there or been at a place where you want to be. That's been super helpful. I feel like that's been the most powerful. I can learn a lot through TED Talks and books, but the people, that relationship, it's huge.
Yeah, for sure. I know one of the things for me, I could have went down the master's in business administration route. And I know that choosing to go the entrepreneurship route for my degree rather than the MBA was going to hold me back as far as some traditional ways of going. And I've seen it where it has kind of held me back from being able to get, a certain job or to have certain qualification or whatever too. But at the same time, like I will never give up the experiences of being able to learn from people. And that's what I loved about the entrepreneurship side of the curriculum was every single instructor, teacher, the other students, everything else, they had actual real life experience. They're not teaching you from theory. They're teaching you from their actual experiences and developing a curriculum based on those experiences. And I love that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So last question here. So what do you think holds military members, spouses, dependents, and veterans back from getting started with whatever their endeavor is going to be?
I think complacency.
Yeah.
I think it's a good life. Like, the military is great. You have benefits. You have your BAH, BAS. You have your salary. You make a pretty decent, if you're an officer, you make pretty decent money. And so I think complacency, you get comfortable in that situation. And for me, like, I don't ever want to be comfortable. Like, I don't want to be comfortable to the point where I can't leave a job or I can't move on to something else. So that's why for me, I'm building different streams of income. So one day I can walk away and I'm not so concerned about where my next paycheck is coming from.
Yeah, right on. So where can people find out more about you and your business? And then also where can they go to actually vote for your stuff coming up too?
Yes. All right. So www.finstew.com. That's where you can find me. I'm on social media heavy on Instagram. And that's at Jasmine, Jasmine, like Like, Paul, Paul. And then you can vote at the Inspire Youth Fest Summit online. So voting ends this Tuesday. So I don't know when this is going to be live.
I'm gonna try to get it out like immediately. So.
Oh, yay. But yeah, Inspire Youth Fest. And then I can send you the link as well. So all votes are helpful. Top 5. And then votes from audience participation will help me to reach the top 3. And then I'll be pitching to hopefully earn the funding for my first print run of my 1,000 books.
Yeah, right on. That's awesome. Yeah, so I'll link to all that stuff. Create FinStew is where you can find everything about Jasmine and what she's got going on, as well, where I will be getting my first children's book from her, for sure. So, Jasmine, I seriously, I know it's really short notice, but I really appreciate you coming on. It is a delight to see your bright and shining, smiling face again.
Thanks, John. This has been awesome. You're doing an amazing job. I was listening to your podcast a few weeks ago, and I was like, he needs to get a deal with Spotify. Like, his voice is it. Like, you are doing it. You're doing something that veterans need, and I believe that it's a gap that needs to be filled. So I'm very thankful that you've opened your community up to me. Thank you for the support.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah. Take care, Jasmine. I look forward to being able to do some stuff with you in the future for sure.
Absolutely, John.
All right.